Today is a exciting, fun lesson. I'd like to think I get really into the details and nuts and bolts about how to create families and objects in Revit. There are a few ways, and we're going to look at how to do it in the family file. So to create objects and then edit objects and all of the different bits of information you can fit in there. So there's quite a bit of information today. And so what I've done is I've got the Revit family presentation, the basic presentation we looked at in the residential design and CAD course. Now I've got Revit families 2, basically, where we're going to go in much more detail. There's a few other things here. One thing I wanted to say, for those of you working away on the base plate assignment still, it is to be done in Revit. I won't accept AutoCAD. So this is a course where we're working with BIM tools, and so we won't be doing anything with AutoCAD. Well, we might talk about it or talk bad about it, but other than that, we're just kidding. So just a reminder there for everyone. So in some cases, I may not mark your assignment, and I might ask for verification that you did it in Revit. So when you're working through that, make sure that you do it that way. So today I do have this presentation here, and it's quite a few slides because I go into real detail and in the steps, and I show you a lot of screenshots showing exactly where to click. So I'm going to do this in Revit as well at the same time. And I have a few examples here. And what we're going to do is look at Revit families and then how we can actually make them from scratch. And some rules inside and things to think about. So I'm going to just start. So here's the first slide, second slide. So in architecture, we will be designing the buildings. That's the kind of the main goal of the overall program. But we'll also choose or design the objects that go into the buildings. That could be furniture. I've chosen some furniture pieces here because they're nice individual objects. But that could be millwork or built-in things, even the doors, the finish schedules, a lot of very varied things that go inside a building. We can also design and create. So some master architects would actually design the furniture in their buildings. So if anyone is familiar with Frank Lloyd Wright, a very, very famous architect who influenced especially residential design massively. When he did a house, he designed everything from the doorknobs to every piece of furniture that went in the house. Now, that's not something we would generally do if we were working in certain aspects of the industry, but we're going to talk about how we use Revit to make some really interesting shapes and sizes. So this presentation will show some tips and best practices for adding and quantifying objects in an architectural design. So this is a two-part presentation. We're going to look at the families this week, and next week we're going to look at scheduling and quantifying the families so that we can put that together into a presentation that does both. So we're going to overlap a little bit with contracts and economics, uniformat, assembly codes, and some of the other things that you might be touching on in the other course. Revit families are file types that allow you to create and quantify objects. So it might seem obvious that we can model things, but it's not as obvious how much we can do on the information side. So we're going to open the door on that and see just how we can program things in pretty good detail today. So we'll look at how to create and edit families in Revit. So in Revit, the objects in your building are called families. They are separate file types than the projects. And in this lesson, well, I'm going to do a little bit of a review of what families are. Then we're going to get into editing and creating them. So let's just go to Revit right now. So I have the screen set here. So this is a project, which we can see it has a sheet. It's small on the screen, but it has a sheet. It has some floor plan views and then some other views and schedules. And And if we click on this here, we can look up top and we can say this is CAPE sample1.rvt. So this is a project file, and we can see, oh, my menu is not showing very good. You can see in our project browser, we have floor plans, schedules, elevations. This is looking like a typical project. But inside that project, we can actually have families. So I have some families here. I'm going to click on this one. So I created this a few years ago because I wanted to be trendy. So there's some pretty cool resin tables being made these days. And if you're not familiar, I'll just do a quick Google search. So people are creating tables with live wood and epoxy resin, and it allows you to create a really interesting river type effect. You can put colors to the resin. So I created a family in Revit that actually approximates that. Here we are. I'll make it a big. So here we are in 3D. Give you a little tour. This is a good one to tour because if I look in the over here, we're in the family file now. This is resintable.rfa. So this is no longer a project. This is a family file. This family can be placed in a project, but this is where you would work with and create the family. So in 3D, you don't necessarily see all the inner workings, but we can come up to here. This is the family types file. And I have a few different sizes programmed in here. So I'm just going to click apply. This table with all the same geometry shrunk down to like a side table. Here we are. This is kind of a coffee table. We've got small dining room table size, and then we've got more like a conference room, boardroom, really big table. And these are all programmed, and you can see when I change the size of everything, go back to this one, the shapes stay consistent. We're going to look at how to do that today. So if we look at the program or the project browser here, we can see a different set of tools. We got floor plan, we got ceiling plan still, but we have 3D view, and then we have elevations, but the elevations are already pre-named. They're named front or left. They're not named east, west, south, north, because we're in an object now, so that frame of reference wouldn't necessarily make sense. These views still function similarly. And we can see here we have some dimensions on these objects. I'm not going to get too ahead of myself. We have some other objects in here that help us control and create these designs. Let's change it to color here. So we're going to get into that in more detail. So here's my table. Close all these extra views. And I'll go back to here. There. So we have a few other examples. So I have a table here with some twisting legs. Just wanted to show that as an example. I'm going to close that up. Go back to the presentation so I don't lose track of everything. So review of using families in Revit. We'll look at these. Family file type. We just looked at that. Family categories. So I'm going to go into a project that has families in it. So here we're going to look at these solar panel families. We may actually make one today. We're going to cover the family library, which Revit has. We're going to look at family types, and then we're going to place a family. So I may just do that here. I'm going to crop that a little bit, and I'll be able to place this, close this up. So we have some room here, and I'll close this up too. We'll come back to you later. Solar panel, oops. So let's follow the order here. So if we look at family file type, let's look at something called family categories. So I've got these solar panel families. I've got furniture families. I've got millwork families. They're all a different category of families. So in Revit, when I go to architecture, If I want to place a family, I'm going to click component. And then it'll show me what's loaded down here in here. And what we can see in this menu is different categories. So there's the desk, that's its own category. There's mutton pattern, there's parking space. Then you get into trees. There's our solar panel, which we're going to work with. There's a bunch of other different families. If I select this solar panel, I can see that this is actually a generic model. It's called itself a generic model. So if I go into edit type, maybe I picked the wrong order to look at that. Let's go into the table. So anyways, we'll actually click here and I'll place the table so we can see. So this is actually a generic model, which we'll talk about briefly, but I'm going to go into the table here. I'm going to load this into the project. Click load. And we can see it's allowing me to place it on a face. And I built this family so that I could place it on any face. It's the most flexible type, which we'll be using. So I can place it on the floor in 3D here. I can place it on the wall, which you might not do for a table, but for fixtures and lighting and other things, you may actually want to put it on. I can put it on this diagonal face, where the sloped roof. If you wanted to, you can put your table up there. But let's just put it in here in a normal spot. I'll put it right there. Escape. So select that. So this is also a generic model. Let's go into the family itself. And I want to come up here. Instead of going to family types, I'm going to go to family category and parameters. So what this is inside the family file, you have a choice of all sorts of different types of families or categories of families. And right now I'm showing you just the architectural types. There's also families for other disciplines. So structure would be beam families and connection families and things like that. Mechanical would be your HVAC items. There's piping and electrical, but we're just going to look at the categories for architecture. And right now, this is a generic model right now. But I could come down here and look for furniture. Where's F? There's furniture. I could set this as a furniture family and go OK. Now I made a change to that family, so I'm going to load it into the project. And I'm going to overwrite the existing version. So nothing really happened physically, but this family here is now showing up as a piece of furniture. And that'll come into value more next week when we start to quantify these things and sort them into separate schedules. So there are many different categories of families. So let's look at the family library, where we're going to have to know what those categories are for things to make a little bit of sense. So I'm in the project here. I'm going to go over to architecture or insert, and I'm going to go load family. Now in here, we have our English Imperial folders. Each one of these folders is a different category of family that you can bring in. And remember I said that the detail items, the 2D items are all in there. But let's go into furniture. And in furniture, now these are all furniture, so these would all be furniture category. And there's a bunch of different types here, or sorry, different families here. Ooh, we have a piano now. Oval mirror. So this folder is packed full of really interesting and useful, like the storage items. This is more of a commercial office type thing, but very useful. A lot of these are already pre-built. So Revit has hundreds and hundreds of very good quality families to work with. Tables, desk. Let's work with the Revit families first because they're good quality and we want to be familiar with where things are. So let's go up here. Let's look at doors. We actually have all sorts of different door families too. So this is a family that would only host in a wall. I was looking more at, so you would actually need a wall to work with the door. Now, some of these folders have families like furniture where they're going to sit where you put them versus having to be in a wall or something like that. family library, family types. So when we were looking at this in here in the family, I actually opened up this menu and I started to change the sizing a little. But when we're in the project, so on the left here, we see we're in the panel project. If I click here, I'm in the RFA format. You can see that my title bars change. I get a different set of tools, my ribbon. So when I go into the project, I get all my tools. If I click on this family here, because I have different sizes available, I can click here. These are all different sizes of that same family. And what Revit calls these are different types of the same family. If I click on that one, it'll change to that one. If I click on that one, it changes to that one. So these are different types of a similar family for the same family. So if I go edit type, then I get access. While I'm inside the project still, I get access to those tools. And when you build the family properly, you get access to these tools in a way that you don't have to go and break the family apart to change things. You can actually edit the size by going here. I'm going to make this 10 feet. And I'm going to click apply. And the family will actually change to reflect that. And go 3 feet. Apply. Still works. Let's go 20. Let's see what happens. Apply. No, too far. So there's limits. The family broke. So what I did here was I was flexing the family or changing some of the parameters to see how many options we can have. So this was actually my 6 foot long type. So I have to put that back to 6 feet because the sizing here doesn't actually match the name. The name is independent of that. So if you're making different types, so this is my family name, that's the family, and this is the type. And we can edit some of the parts of the type. And place the family. So we did place the family. What I did was I could either go to component and place families that are already in my project. You can place them in 2D or 3D. Or if I'm working on a family, I can go load into project and that will load it in. And now if I go to component, it'll remember the last family I was working on. Family file type. So these are just the different categories. So another way you can get those categories for the family is if you're in any view in your project and you go visibility graphics, you're going to see all the different categories available. So these are family categories and something called system families, like your walls and your floors and your beams. And we're only looking at structure or architecture here. So those are our different categories, model categories. Okay. So I just skip through these slides because we placed a family types, edit a family type. So we went in and we actually keyed in some of these shapes. Edit a family file, load a family, okay. Place a family. So some of this is review. The family file. So let's go into object creation. And this, we're gonna use these tools to make a family. So I'm gonna make a solar panel family because I think it's nice, makes sense for the times. I'm gonna close this up. I don't want to save it. So now I've got this here. So I have these families in here. So let's take a look. Let's investigate this family a little bit and look at some of the objects in this family. And then we're going to make it from scratch. So if I select a family, I can go edit family or I can double click. So now I've gone into this family. So the solar panel scratch, because I made it from scratch, .rfa. So we can come in here and we can see, oh, well, this is a smaller one. So let's investigate the different types. So family types. Inside the family, you have to click this button. You can't click this gray button here like you would in the project. See, in the project, I would click this edit type, but in the family, I have to click this button here. So this shows me I have 2x2, a 4x1, and a 4x2. And here's some of the parameters. So these items here are all called parameters, and they're pre-made right now, but we're going to make them. So I could change this to a 4x2, click apply, different size, 2x2, apply. We'll go to the 4x1, apply, click OK. So let's look at the different tabs that we have. Different tools. Yeah. So when I'm in here, my first tab is called the Create tab. And the tools I have here are things like extrusion, blend, revolve. And these are the tools we're going to look at mostly today. Reference line and some of these set work plane we're going to use a little bit to load into project. Some of these tools we're not going to get into. They're a little more advanced. So we have a different set of tools here. The insert tab's pretty much the same, but everything's grayed out. You can bring in a CAD file or a PDF file. Let's say you wanted to create a file that matched something from a manufacturer and they don't have a Revit. You could bring that in and trace it. You could load families into families, which we're not going to do today. Annotate. So this is similar. We have the text tools, but we have a little more simplified. The view tab, much more simplified. We really just make 3D views. We can make other plan views, section views really, but our family file is already pre-built with these views. And we don't actually have to make those from scratch. We can add to them. Manage, this is similar. Add-ins, I'm going to leave that off. And our modify tab, which is very similar to the project tab. So let's go to create. So we have different tools for making their objects directly. So let's actually look at the parts inside the view. So I'm looking in 3D here. What we can see is this block. This was a generic family, and I think I've changed it now to, yeah, it's still a generic model. Okay. In most families, you're going to have a placeholder like this block here. So this family is made to be placed on a face. So in the family, by default, there's a placeholder here. We don't need to use this block. It's just there for while you're modeling, so you can see what you're doing. Let's go to a front view. Oh no, let's go to this view. This is the floor plan view. And this is where we're seeing the shape and geometry of this family. In this view, we're going to have things like reference lines. So actually, these are reference planes. So if I hover over this, it's a green dashed plane, and it's actually pinned front and back. And then this one's pinned. So those don't change. This is the center point of your family. And then you can add additional ones. These are unnamed ones. And we're going to use these planes to actually control our geometry or control whatever we're going to build. Let's look at a front view. Oops. So here we are. Here's our reference block. That block that's already in there. Here's a reference level. This lets us know if we're placing this in a project, it has the same visual look as a level. So it'll help us place things on a level. But then we have reference planes in here that allow us to control our geometry, which I'll get to in a second. We also have dimensions. So I have this dimension here. And these dimensions are going to control the size of the object. And here's a dimension string that's been set to equality. And then there's a few here. Placeholder block, reference level, reference planes, forms. Oh yeah, I didn't talk about the actual form. So let's look in the 3D view or view one. So there's an actual physical object that you're going to be modeling. And putting materials on. Forms, void forms. So you can actually cut with some forms. So if we look here very closely, this is an object that's one object, and then we're using another void form. I have to tab in very carefully. This void form is actually cutting into that object. See, I just made it cut right through. It's cutting in, so that's a void form. That allows us to do a live subtract. Dimensions, parameters, okay, locks and EQs. I'm going to get into that in a second. So I'm actually going to start to create a blank file here, and the next few slides will cover that. But I'm just going to do it inside Revit. So I'm going to close this file up. Close. No save. So we're going to leave the project on in the background. We're going to make an object and start to place it in here. So what I want to do is I want to go to File. And I'm going to go New. And I don't want to go New Project. I want to go New Families. Creates a set of custom components to use in projects. And I click this. Revit opens up the New Family Templates location. Okay. So I want to choose, I'm going to go Imperial today. So when I go in Imperial, what we've got here is a special folder that looks like that other library, but this isn't the other library. These are generic blank family templates that are there for you to create your own families. So we have ones for balusters. They already have if you look at the preview, it has reference planes and parameters and things already in it that would allow you to make your own custom family. And it's for almost every category has one. And this gives you a head start to make like a door. The door is already set up and you can in a wall. So you don't have to build it from complete scratch. You just work from that template. What I found that is the most flexible, if you're going to create a family, is rather than drilling into that specific family type, unless you know exactly what you're doing, come over here. There's this group here of generic models. So there's just the base generic model, which has nothing but a center point. But we want something that we can place on faces in our project. So we're going to come up here to generic face-based. Face-based is going to give us the best flexibility when we're placing families into the project. If you use any of these other ones, you might get stuck not being able to put your family exactly where you want it. I'm going to click Open. And I'm just opening up a brand new family file. So it's called Family 1. So I'm going to go File, Save As, Family. I don't want to put it in my library. I want to put it someplace I can readily find. So I guess let's call it Solar 1. So I'm going to click Save. So let's take a look at this family based on those things that we've already previewed. So we've got our block here. This is a generic visual block. Go to our 3D view. So there's nothing in here right now, nothing. We've got two reference planes. We've got a center left, right that's pinned and a center front back that's pinned. So this is the center of the model and that's good. So let's go to the front view. And in here, we've got a reference level and that center left, right. It's a reference plane, so we can see it in multiple views. So what I'm going to do is, I think I can just close this. No. I'm going to tile my view and I don't want to see this one. Every new update of Revit, they change the way these windows work. I'm just going to close this. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, solar panel. Okay, great. So what we're going to, I need that project. I got to bring it back. Got to bring my project back. Solar panel project. Okay, there you are. Okay, cool. You're going to hide down there. That's fine with me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly just throw some geometry in here using the extrude tool. And then we're going to learn how to control that geometry. Yeah, okay. So here we go. I'm going to go to the floor plan view and I'm going to go extrusion. The reason I choose the floor plan view is that means that if I choose any one of these objects, it's going to start to model it on that work plane. So this reference plane, this reference level. So when I go create, I'm going to go extrusion and it goes into our familiar sketch mode. So I'm going to use a rectangle and I'm going to do this offset deliberately. When I do that, I'll hit escape. It's given me a sketch and it's showing me in the other three views. Hey, well, you're going to create something here. So I just randomly chose a rectangle, but it's on this face now, which is what I want. And I'm going to go check mark. So this rectangle has an extrusion end and start. If I go in here, I have this grip and I've actually created a shape and these grips can be grabbed, however imprecisely. So I'm very proud of my object. I'm going to load it into that project. So solar 1. Let's save it again because we don't want to lose that work. Load into project. So, ooh, I want this to be big now. So I loaded that into the project and it wants to place it. And the reason we went face-based is this is going to allow me to put it on any face that I can hover over. You see the preview here, even these little angled faces, if I catch it. So I'm going to put this just right there. So that allowed me to place that family. Now we have a bit of work to do to get this to look like that. So I'm going to go back into the family, go view 1. So it's a little bit too tall for me. So I'm going to come here and I'm just going to shrink that. I'm going to shrink this. And I want this to be 4 by 2. So, I got to go here and I'm going to make this, well, it can be tempting to come in here and go create, annotate, and just starting putting dimensions on this. I'm just going to put dimensions on this and I'm going to make this 4 by 2. So cool, I've got a 4 by 2 object. Maybe I can go to the front view and I can define how thick it is. So I'm going to grab that reference level and then the top here, and oh, it's 3.5. If you want that to be, oops. I'm going to change the scale to something a little bit better. See, my text shows up. Oh, see, it won't even let me define the thickness of that. So I'm getting a little hint here from Revit that's saying, don't put dimensions directly on your model. That might cause some trouble. You may not actually be able to control things properly. So the biggest habit, so see, this is offset too. It's not even in the center. I want this in the center. How would I get it to the center? The first thing you really want to think about is, I'm just going to load this in a project and overwrite. Well, that's better. We're closer. When you're working with a family, you want to get your object, but it can be very tempting to draw your object or use some of these tools here and then put dimensions directly on it and then edit it directly. But that's not actually a very good way of doing things, because if you do that, then your object's going to be really hard to control. And some of the settings inside Revit won't actually let you control it directly, like using these blue active dimensions. What you want to do is, let's just move this out of the way. You want to use reference planes to define the size of your objects. It's an added step, but it allows you to control things much more clearly. So let's do that. Let's go create, let's go reference line. Oh, not reference line. I want a reference plane. Reference plane. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to draw 1 foot off of there, and it's this left reference plane snapping to that other reference plane here. And I'm gonna draw one here. Here. I'm gonna draw one here. And I'm not too worried about the size at the moment. There. Now I have a set of reference planes, and I can look at the front view. I have reference planes here too. So we want to take our geometry. I'm going to delete these dimensions. We want to take our geometry, which can float around pretty good. And I want to drag this till it highlights that nearest. And then when I let go, it's going to say, do you want to lock this to that reference plane? I do. I'm going to lock it to that reference plane. There's a number of ways you can lock, but I'm just going to do this visually. Lock. 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 Now when I go, and if this reference plane moves, now my object connects to that reference plane. Now I'm getting a very specific understanding of what's controlling my object. So let's put on some dimensions on these reference planes. So I'm going to go annotate. I'm going to do an overall dimension here. And then I'm going to do an intermediate string here. I want to click on this string and click equals. So what have I done here? I put an overall string and an equals string. So now when I drag this one, the object will stay equal on both sides. Now I've defined this object to sit on that center point. I'm going to go to a better scale. You can really zoom in. Yeah. So I just created a relationship here. And because I locked my geometry to those reference planes, now I have a strong relationship between what's happening. I will do this again a number of times so you can see the steps. Let's take this even further. I don't want that to be just 2, 2, 2, where I have to come here and key that in. I want to come over here. This is my family types. I want to have a parameter in here that I can type in that number, and I don't currently have one yet. So this is how you would do that. I want to select the dimension, and right now the word label should be the same as parameter. There's none yet. I want to go create parameter. Get this lovely window here, and I'm going to go width dimension. So I'm going to leave all the defaults here and click OK. And now that's added the word width to that. So I can still come and drag this physically. Or now that I've placed a parameter on this, I can come in here and I have a width to work with. This shows up. A parameter has been created. So I'm going to make that 2 feet. Click apply. Now I can control this by keying in text. So let's do that again for the length. We'll do it another 2 times. So I'll come over to annotate. I want to put a dimension on the overall. Then I want to do a dimension string to the center line and to the other edge. Now these aren't connected right now. They're independent. So if I select that string and go EQ, then these become linked. They're linked together now. The length will change equidistant to the center point here. Now I'm going to click on this and give it a label like that. I'm going to go here, go and in our parameter properties, I'm going to call this length. Okay. And now length shows up in my dimensions. So I want this to be 4 feet, 4 feet. Apply. Okay. So let's do this one more time in the front view. I want to be able to control the thickness of this. And the thickness isn't controlled by a dimension necessarily, although the dimension can show the thickness. I can drag this grip because this is an extrusion off of that face. It just has a different way of talking to the model. So I could go into this extrusion and I can edit this number here to make it something huge, 6 feet. Just gonna click undo. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this and create a label with, oh, wait, I'm already tempted to dimension directly to the object. See, this happens all the time and it's so tempting to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that dimension. I'm going to place another reference plane in my model. So this reference plane is going to define the height. So I'm going to come here, drag that grip, and I'm going to hover over there till it says nearest and snaps, and I'm going to lock it. Now this is connected to that plane. Now this plane, I could either go annotate and click, or I could just create a dimension right there. Now this plane is editable, 4 inches. So it's an added step, but it gives us a really good level of control. 1 inch. I'm gonna go 2 inches. And I want to put a label on this one too, or a parameter on this one. So this is going to be, that could be depth or thickness. And see how if we come down here by default, the group parameter is dimension. So you can see all the different groups here. I click OK, it adds that thickness label. But now I can come in here, I'll go 3D. Oops. 3D. If I come in here to my edit type, now I have thickness, and see how it's grouped with these other dimensions? I could just hide that or show it again. That's the group. So I have to make sure that it's grouped nicely with that. So I'm going to click OK. Now I can load this into project. Overwrite existing version and values. There. If I click on this here and go edit type, I have these options now. I can change things. Now, because there's only one type, only one size created, I only have the choice of one right now. So let's go back into our model here. We're going to add a few more parameters. Just for some repetition, we're going to add a material and another parameter. So I want to put a depression in this, in the top of this, where a glass plane would be. Yeah, let's do that. So what I'm going to do is, rather than going to my reference level, I'm going to come here, go to view, and I'm going to come over here to create. I'm going to go over to void forms and go void extrusion. Now I want to just see, well, what plane is this extrusion going to be on? We can click show. And that's going to give me the plane that extrusion works on. I want it to actually be on this top face because I want it to cut into that top face. So I have to click set. And it's going to give me a choice of the different reference planes available, or allow me to pick a plane in the view. So I'm going to go pick a plane, click OK. And I want to get that plane there. And when I do that, this show feature comes to the top. So I'm actually working on that there. That's great. And I want to just turn off the show. So I know. So now I'm going to use a rectangle, and I'm going to do this really scrappy right now. We'll fix it up later. So I put a void extrusion on here, and I'm going to click OK. And so void extrusions work a little strange. I just put this in here, and by default, it made it 1 foot thick. So if you see, it's cutting through everything. When I click on it, it doesn't cut. But when I click away, it cuts through that shape. So I'm going to make this 1 inch thick, just 1 inch thick. There, now it's much thinner. And it's cutting in just 1 inch. And that's a little bit closer than what I want. I'm going to go to the front view, and we can see it's cutting 1 inch. Now I can make it 1/2 inch. I think I'm going to leave it as 1 inch. Now, let's make this with a consistent frame around the outside. To do that, I'm going to go to the reference level here, and we're going to start using our dimensions and our reference planes again. So I'm going to go create, I'm going to go reference plane, and I'm just going to do a small one in here. And I'm going to place a dimension on it. I want to reference this reference plane to that outside reference plane. So I'm going to go here and here, hit escape a few times. Now I'm going to come in here. I want this to be 1 inch. So that's going to stay 1 inch. And actually, I want it to stay 1 inch no matter what I do. So I'm clicking on this and locking it. So what I've done is I locked this reference plane to whatever happens with this reference plane. So if that gets dragged out, that's going to go with it. It's going to stay 1 inch away from it, always. Now, I don't recommend locking dimensions unless you have a very specific reason to do so. So we locked that dimension. So let's do this on all 4 sides. I'm going to just mirror this. And I'm going to go and let's say dimension. Oh, I want to go from the reference plane, not the object, the other reference plane. If I do it from the object, things can explode and not work properly. So lock that one. So let's do a reference plane here as well. And I want to put a dimension on it to the reference plane here. And I want to set that as 1 inch as well. And I'm going to lock it. And now we're going to mirror this one. So I'm going to use the mirror pick access, and I'm picking this access to mirror it from. So it just mirrors it nicely there. I'm going to put a dimension on it. Go okay. Now I locked these because I always want them to stay 1. Okay. So now I can take my cut from my void form and I can drag this until it hits that nearest on that and let go. And I'm going to lock this to the reference plane. I'm going to drag this one to lock to the reference plane. I'm going to show you another way to do it. I'm going to edit the extrusion. So I'm actually editing the sketch. I can drag it inside my sketch nearest and lock. Or another way I could do it is if it's very complicated, I could go align. I could align to this. I want to align that. And it gives me a chance to lock it. There's a few ways to do that. So I click OK. We just look at view 1. Now I've got that object 1 inch border. So can ignore this one. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to flex this. So what I mean by flex is I'm going to change the size of the object to see where it'll break or where it'll work. So I can move that and the border changes with it. So I'm going to undo those nudges and.
Hey, Nathaniel, I got a quick question.
Yes.
So what if I wanted to create an edge around the
There's a
box
number of ways we can do that. I'm going to finish up the demonstration and I'll show you how, okay?
Thank you.
So I'm going to save right now because we did a bunch of work. And I'm going to load this into project. I'm going to load into project. Override existing version. So now it's added those borders. So we're going to take this even further. I'm actually going to close the file up right now. So I'm going to go to one of the family windows. I'm going to go File, Close. So it's closed that family completely. Now the only way I'm accessing it is through my model. So we've got Solar 1. Now you got to be careful because you can load a family into a project and have it saved in that project and even make changes to that family in the project. And that file might sit on a computer somewhere and be independent of that. So I'm giving you all the details, maybe more details than you might need. Where are you hiding? Yeah, so this file's right here is on my documents, but I also have it now in my project. So if we go in the project browser and families, you can see all those family categories. If we find generic, there's generic models. Here we go. Here's Solar 1. And we have one type right now. So let's make another type. Just wanted to show you that we have that available. So let's go back into the family. I want to have a solar panel that's 4 by 2 by 2 inch thick. And I want another one that's 4 by 1. So I'm going to go new type and I'm going to call it 4 by 1. Okay. Now I have that type. Click OK. Oops. So the name is independent. So I actually have to make this 4 by 1. 1. Click OK. Let's load this in the file again. So I'm trying to go through all the little pit stops. So what happened was in this file, I just loaded in, oh, I added a new type. But that file already was in there and it already had the 4 by 2 type. So it can be a little confusing. You might have to balance between the family that's already loaded in the project. So if I come down here, I've got solar, now I've got 2 types of that solar panel. Versus this family here, this is the actual family. So there's a little bit of balancing there. I just wanted to show you. Oh, I'm going to do more. Don't worry. So I'm just going to close this. Inside the family, I'm going to select or inside the project now, I'm going to select the family and go edit type. And see, we have 4 by 1 and solar 1. I'm going to rename this one. It's actually 4 by 2. This is the 4 by 2. So I'm going to rename that 4 by 2. Oh, rename 4, not 4 foot 2, 4 by 2. Click OK. And I actually want to bump this up, see width. Oh, I can't do that here. That's fine. So click OK. So now I can look. There's 3 different places. I have a 4 by 1 and a 4 by 2. This is the solar 1 family. I can see it in this menu. I can swap it in this menu. I can go edit type. I can see it in this menu. Or I could directly edit the size. And I can see it down here. This is in my family's location in the project browser. I want to show you all these places. Revit has several places where these things live. So let's do one last thing, and then we'll get into the edges and stuff like that. I'm going to add the materials to this because right now this is all gray. So I'm going to go in here. I want to make this box like a white paint color, and I want to make that void cut look kind of like glass with a little pattern on. So to do that, we're going to create, we're going to put materials on this. So I'm going to click here. When I select that object, you can see what's cutting it with the orange, which is nice. And oh, interestingly enough, since I closed and reopened this file, now when I come in here, I have the nicely named objects. I'm going to make this window bigger. Okay, so let's do our material. So I'm in the family, so make sure you're in the family. Select the actual extrusion, then come over here to material. And right now it's set to by category. If I single click there, it's going to open up the material browsers. So I put the material browser. So this is a review from the other semester. I put a few slides in here to show you these windows. And then there's a little tutorial from LinkedIn Learning if you want to revisit that. But in the material browser, I've got all the materials in that project are here. And then I've got, oh, come on. Okay, my libraries aren't loaded perfectly. Great. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for white. Great. So for some reason, my library is not loaded, and I'm not going to fix that right now. I really need that library though. I don't know the location on the computer. It's by default, I thought it would be loaded. Anyways, let's make a material. Go to the Manage tab. So instead of going directly to the material, I'm gonna go to the manage tab. I'm having a little hiccup here. I'm gonna go materials. Search white. So by default, you should have access to, anyways, all right, we're gonna have to make one. So this will still be valuable. What I'm gonna do is find a material in here that I can use. I want the default material. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna right click, I'm gonna go duplicate. And I'm gonna oh, it lets me name right away. I wanna name it white paint. Enter. So I have white paint. So let's go through the identity. That's white paint. Class, we'll leave that alone. Graphics. Right now, I want to set this. I'm going to go to appearance first. So there's nothing setting that appearance. I'm going to go to information, generic, generic, generic. I'm going to change this color to white. So I did so by clicking directly on the color. Just leave that alone. I can come in here, use render appearance. So it uses this color to help define this color. So if I check that box, it'll grab that there. So I've got white paint. I'm going to click OK. Now I come in here, I can select the object itself, click material, and now I can find white. So if I select that and click OK, now that's a white object. Oh, I can't put a material on the void. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little pane of glass in here. So now I'm getting maybe a bit more advanced than we might need. So I'm going to do this one pretty quick. I'm going to go to the reference plane. I'm going to create. Oh no, I'm going to do it in 3D. I'm going to do it in 3D. I'm going to go create extrusion. Now I'm really going to speed up because this has been a long demonstration. So I'm going to show, we're still on the top. Okay, cool. I'm going to do a rectangle. I'm switching back to here. I'm going to be really sneaky and I'm going to draw this right on these reference planes. So it's going to give me a chance to lock those right away. And then I'm going to come here and I'm dragging it and locking. I'm not using any of the tools. I'm literally just dragging things around. This is where Revit gets really awesome. Once you know how things work, you can start leveraging all that really easily. So I want my thickness to be, well, let's see what happens. 1 foot thick. No, I want -1/4 inch. And I want that, oops. -1/4 inch. And I'm going to make that 0. So what I did there was I just made this drop. I just dropped a little pane of glass on the top there. I'm not going to put a reference plane on the thickness. I just want it to stay. But I'm going to come directly in here and we're going to do something with glass. I'm going to look for glass now. Glass. I'm going to select that. I'm going to go to graphics. I'm going to put a foreground pattern on this. None of my patterns. This is what happens when you switch to 2022. So I'm going to go new fill pattern. So this is going to be a little more advanced. You know what? It's going to have to be this crosshatch one. And I'm going to make that pattern a very light blue, cayenne. Okay. I'm going to go apply. I'm going to go okay. So now I've got a pattern glass. I'm going to close these extra windows. By using that, I'm going to go save because my solar one, yes, I want to replace my solar one. I can flex this inside here by going 4:1 or 4:2. Click apply. So I have the different sizes and I can load this into project. I'm going to overwrite existing parameters. And now I've got my object here. So glass pattern isn't working for another reason, but I can select this and I can switch the different types. Type. Let's get back to the presentation here. I walk through each of these steps in some detail on these slides. Oh, the assembly code. So tying in with what's happening in the contracts and economics course, you'll want to be able to put an assembly code in a description as a parameter as well. So what I'm going to do is double click on this family. We're going to add that parameter as well. So we did physical parameters now. So let's do information parameters in addition to that. So I'm going to come over here to the type. And by default, we already have these fields here. We're going to come into assembly code right here. I'm going to click ... Now you might get this menu if you're not, if you created the family from scratch. So I'm going to leave it and not do it from inside the family. I'm going to click close and we're going to go into the project and do this. Revit already has a database of assembly codes, and this is the Uniformat 2, which is something that you're going to be covering in the other course. So I close the family. I'm saving my project. It's fine. I'm going to click on this family here and go edit type here. So we're inside the project, right? But we still have access to all of these objects. I'm coming to assembly code. I'm going to click ... Revit already has this whole database of your assembly codes in a database file here. And this is the Uniformat classification. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to come into equipment and furnishings. No, I want special construction, building site work, classification. All categories, electrical fixtures. I can filter to electrical fixtures, plus electrical service and distribution. Yes. Low tension service. This might be actually receptacles. I don't have the exact code for this. I do have the code for furniture. We'll look at that next week. But I'm going to click on this low tension service and distribution. Click OK, and it adds that code in, and it actually adds the description in as well. Click OK. So we're going to use that when we start to schedule and quantify these objects, which will be for next week. So there's some examples on how to do that. Online families. So we just created a family. I'm just starting to summarize now. You can go to manufacturer's website, any manufacturer, look at their product and see if they have Revit families available. They're usually pretty good. If not, you can go to revitcity.com or BIM object and you can sign up, and for free, you'll be able to get Revit families. Now the quality can be pretty low. Autodesk Seek is something that they provided where there's additional families available, but it's not really maintained as much. So you can get lower quality families online if you want to search. Those are some locations. So just to review, we used the family library. We edited a family size. We created a family from scratch. And we made the family parametric using the reference planes, the dimensions, and the geometry itself. We added assembly codes. And then I showed you some additional places to find. So that's what I had for my presentation today. I'm going to place this video up. So I'm going to pop out of the meeting, come back in, and then we'll take a look at some of those questions.